All right, let's get right into this. So we just did a video that basically got cut off because the internet, something happened to the signal. That sometimes happens when I'm talking about things that are particularly spicy, which is what this video is about. Whether or not Trump is going to go ahead and be able to not pay food stamps. As you know, he doesn't want to pay out these contingency fund food stamps because at the end of the day, what's happening is he feels that he should not have to because he believes they should be kept in reserve for the purpose of potential war, potential hurricane, potential super duper crisis. He believes that at the end of the day, a government shutdown, which is something that is a controlled event, is not an uncontrolled act of God or super evil situation to be in. Now, let's go right to the quote. We're going to go ahead and pick up and do the video again of the one that was just cut off. So President Donald Trump stated the following, November 4th, 2025, this morning: SNAP benefits, which increased by billions and billions of dollars, manyfold during crooked Joe Biden's disastrous term in office, due to the fact that they were haphazardly handed to anyone for the asking, as opposed to just those in need, which is the purpose of SNAP, will be given only when the radical left Democrats open up government, which they can easily do and not before. Now, remember, COVID, food stamps were handed out a lot because of COVID, and we were getting a lot of instructions from the government about how we're going to be shut down and limited in our transportation and limited in our access to doing things and limited to how many people could actually attend parties, so on and so forth. But at the same time, Trump, and I'm just going to summarize what I was talking about in the last video, Trump, I don't think, has a really strong understanding of how the poor or homeless work when it comes to food stamps. The middle class, they work very differently. The middle class is used to waking up and 5 out of 7 days, or could be more, could be less, but usually 5 out of 7 days, going to work, making an employer happy, getting a payment, saving their money so that they can go ahead and spend it on a holiday. That is how the middle class works. The poor, the homeless, the food stamp recipients do not work like that at all. Food stamp recipients are not about getting marching orders, are not about having to follow a boss, are not about having to direct themselves to go ahead and be a certain way, look a certain way, achieve certain things so they can have more money. That's not their thing for the most part in a very, very large aspect of it. Food stamps, you have basically women who have, or potentially, I'll keep it open, men who potentially have lots of kids. You have people who are generational food stampers that basically generation after generation after generation have never worked. It is a cultural, almost in their DNA, acceptance of continuing to receive food stamps as part of their life and existence. You have food stampers who were basically working really hard and something happened. They were working under the table and it didn't work out. Or you have food stampers that basically were in a situation where, they're in a rural area or they're part of a tribe and they just can't get out of the rut that they're stuck in. But at the end of the day, those receiving food stamp benefits, whether the person has 6, 7 kids, or the person basically is part of a super rural area and can't get anywhere, or the person basically is in a situation where, they've just always received government assistance in the form of welfare and that's all they know. That's what their parents knew, where they just don't have the experience of parents who worked. And let me tell you something, that is a huge, huge thing. As somebody who's worked almost for decades now, almost for 2 decades with the homeless and the low income in different capacities, whether it's my firm, other firms, or working at the homeless facility, which I'm going to tomorrow, by the way. So if you call the law firm tomorrow, you can't get a hold of me until way later in the day because I work with the homeless on Wednesdays. You have to understand that the food stamp individuals, they're thinking about what they're going to do for themselves today, tomorrow, the next day, right? The middle class, they're thinking more about it in the sense of what are they going to do this month, 6 months, this year. You get a little more money, 2 years, even more money, 5 years. You get even more money and more money. The next 10 years, 20 years, you become a billionaire. You're looking at generational wealth transactions. How do you keep the rest of your family wealthy for the rest of their time, their existence, their whatever? And just to be clear, I think that there's some confusion about some of the things that YouTubers and other TikTokers and Facebookers have posted. Most super wealthy families, when they have kids that don't act like they're wealthy, they are unimaginably wealthy because those funds were put into trusts, and those trusts distributed to the kids monthly amounts that would cover all of the needs of those kids generation after generation after generation. Now, some groupings of those kids found a way to beat the trust and screwed up their entire livelihood for their future and their kids' future. Sure. And it is true. super wealthy people have a high percentage of children that are born with depression, that are born with anxiety, and that commit terrible things to themselves. This is true. Also, super wealthy go-getters tend to have kids. And I've seen this a lot where basically their child will not have the same go-getter attitude that they do. And the wife or the other spouse that's upbringing them is not what I would say a business-oriented person. And they're the one who ends up raising the child because the business-oriented person is spending all their time at the business. So you do see a lot of children of wealthy people making poor financial choices. But that proves very simply, very directly, that people who are essentially not given good parenting on how to succeed, on how to achieve, on what to do, they end up not having a life where they have lots of funds, where they have lots of money, okay, resources, assets, whatever you want to call it. Here's why this is important to understand. A lot of people who are on food stamps, they didn't have parents who knew how to tell them how to invest. Okay. They didn't have parents that told them how to go ahead and financially use their money to better themselves and their future and potentially their children's future. And so at the end of the day, you have a lot of kids that are showing up in the short videos on TikTok and Facebook and YouTube and stuff like that, where you're seeing these cultures. I see people screaming, ghetto. I see people screaming, basically hostile, criminals, this, that, whatever. I see a lot of people screaming these words, and they don't understand why that individual doing those criminal or just off the wall acts is like that. It's because usually, not always, but usually, they didn't have a good structured upbringing. That's why at the end of the day, right, when you see these traditional Christian households judging people, looking at people and being like, why would you do that? Why would you go that way? Why didn't you do this? It's because those traditional Christian households had a secret. And the secret was that they, as a community, would raise each other up with education, knowledge, church meetings, etc. Same thing for, my background, the Jewish background, they would raise each other up with knowledge and sharing of ideas and increasing the overall achievement base of the population. Now, food stampers, they've got a grapevine, which is where you tell one person one thing and it ends up, everybody knows it by the end of the day. But that grapevine is not usually based on science, math, economic policy of international trade. It's not usually based on that stuff. So what happens is you have Trump over here, and I feel a little bad for him with this because he just doesn't get it. He just doesn't get it. He's screaming. If you look at like his quote here, he is literally screaming, right? Caps on, manifold, exclamation. He's screaming. He's screaming into his computer through his fingers that why don't, at the end of the day, these, SNAP recipients call Schumer, bitch at Schumer, and make Schumer bend a knee to him. That's because at the end of the day, those receiving food stamps don't have the same mental design with how they approach life as those who are in the middle class. Of course, there's variations. You have some food stamp recipients that think just like the middle class, and some middle class that think just like the homeless. So the reality here is this: if Trump were to rally the troops, the middle class, and say, "Go call this person to get this fixed," the middle class would pick up the phone and call them at Schumer's office over and over and over and over again. Absolutely. But that's not what that's not what the impoverished class is going to do. The impoverished class is not going to want to have to put the effort in to figure out how to do all these things, to change legislation at that level. They'd rather just blame Trump. It's easier that way. It's much easier to just blame Trump. That's realistically what's going on. You tell me, you have a homeless person. They wake up in a tent. They get a food stamp card, little card. That's the only card that they really keep on them, other than maybe a state ID, okay? Or maybe a library card, right? So let's just hypothetical. Let's think with our brains and like just break it down here, okay? What we have here is a person who lives under a tarp, under a tent, right? On top of a cot, because the bottom of the tent gets wet. And that's their base. That's their home. That's their thing. Their moment, right? This person now hears two arguments. Argument one is we need to reduce the amount of people on food stamps to increase the profitability of America, to produce more capacity to make other countries fear America due to its very large military, so other countries will fall in line and basically use our currency, the US dollar, when trading with other countries, so that our currency will be more in use throughout the world and increase the overall dollar's value, thereby increasing the United States citizen's standard of living. That's argument one. That's argument one. That's the Republican argument. Then you have argument two. Trump said he's not paying out food stamps because he doesn't like the Democrats. You should hate Trump because of that. That's argument two. That's the thing that the Democrats are saying right now. So what's happening is, what would be easier? Fiscal responsibility, understanding of a reserve currency being used in international, trade, or would the homeless person better understand, hate Trump? He did this. He wouldn't let me eat. I'm hungry because of Trump. Now, look, I don't think anybody sits back and remembers or even sits back and says to them or states to themselves, hey, Biden wouldn't have done this, or Biden wasn't present. They're finding more evidence where he just was not present, did not have the mental faculties to do the job. And I mean, Kamala Harris, to be fair, she has a difficult time stringing together words to give a speech. I'm sorry, but I've seen quite a few of her speeches. It is punishment to sit through them. It is just disgraceful to think that she had the degrees and certificates that she did and still got to that position and still did not have a team of people helping her to actually create simple, direct, and very capable of being spoken speeches. It blows my mind, which is why I sit back and honestly, Trump is a constant lion. It's constant rah, getting out there, go, 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 go. And on the Democrat side, it's like a lot of constant victimhood, If the Democrats had an actual lion on their side, the Democrats would do very well, but they don't. Everybody's a victim on the D side. How could he, but that's my point. If you're poor, you're impoverished, you're in a poverty setting, you don't have money, blame Trump is easy and it makes sense. That's the reality. Quote number 2. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, briefing November 4th, 2025 today. We are digging into a contingency fund that is supposed to be for emergencies, catastrophes, for war, and the president does not want to have to tap into this fund in the future. You won't be able to. I mean, for the most part, until it refunds itself, until it has tax money put into it again, you won't be able to. It's gone. It's about to be spent. The best way to get the full amount of SNAP benefits to those beneficiaries is for Democrats to reopen the government. So what is she saying? 1, they're digging into the contingency funds. They're getting ready to ramp up and pay them. This is counter to what Trump is saying. Trump is saying, ain't going to pay them, which means I think from a legal standpoint, he's going to try and veto what those judges said. He's going to try and get it up to the circuit. He's going to take it from the district, push it to the circuit, or he's going to do some other little things to make time get spent. But you can see, and I think it's pretty straightforward. At this point. You can see that Trump is not doing so well with this whole starve the poor people so that the Democrats will bend a knee to him. It's just not going in his way. It's not going in his way. And look, let me give you an example of this. Trump is arguing that this situation is not a catastrophe. Let's apply some basic logic to this, okay? So we're at the beginning of the month. Today is the 4th, right? Okay, so some of these food stamps should have already been paid out. Quite a few states should have already been paid out. Cool. All right. So we got that. So we know that the harm exists, but it's not a big harm. It's not like potential life or death harm. It's not like that. It's just we got 4 days in on this month. At what point down the calendar month of November does this hit the shittles and skittles, right? At what point does this entire situation shaboink itself? Okay, let's think about this. Now we get to the 10th day and people don't have food. They got to go to these different food facilities, the pantries, Samaritan centers, Second Harvest. They got to go get food. Okay, all right, I understand. Okay, I got it. Now we get to 15 days in. Now we get to 20 days in. Now we get to 25 days into November. At what point does this starving the poor people situation create a shaboink among the Republican Party? I feel like, honestly, to be fair, I feel like if Charlie Kirk were alive, he would have told Trump that he was doing the wrong thing. He would have been able to understand where impoverished people were with this situation, and he would have been able to deliver the message of where young people are at and how this whole thing is going to go to shit show land. But that's not going to happen. So what we have is a disconnect. We don't have enough young people being able to reach the older Republicans, and the older Republicans tend to think of people making decisions as if they were making the decision themselves. Now, let's be fair. Every person watching this video, every person watching the news later, every person watching this or that or whatever, every single person, okay, has a different level of capacity for analysis. And to be fair, we all have our biases. We all have our things. Some people smoke. Some people smoke really funky monkey stuff. Some people drink, right? Some people, are workaholics. Maybe it's self-hatred. I don't know. I want to play music right now. It's just not going to happen. So the point I'm getting at with this is we all have these weird little things in us that make us analysis machines that are a little bit broken, just a little bit broken. We're a little bit messed up. And so as a result of that, I sit back and I think to myself, okay, well, that's not the end of the world. But you understand that, some people are going to love Trump for this. Yeah, don't pay those people. And some people are going to hate Trump for this. Why would you starve 42 million people? Why would you starve 42 million people? Poet Kirk, thank you for the $2 donation. That's awesome. Thank you for all you do. Join membership today. Thank you. I super appreciate that. The memberships definitely help me get the gear. We're going to be doing amazing things in the future. I just I need to put the audio gear into a desk and put it into a patch thing, but I'll tell you about that later. I was learning about patch bays today. It's a little bit, they're funky monkey design. All right, with that said, let's go to the next quote real quick. US Department of Agriculture, and that's really the important group at the end of the day, because they're the ones that are doing the practical application of the food stamps. USDA court filing November 3rd, 2025 via Deputy Undersecretary Patrick Penn, quote, "The administration intends to deplete SNAP contingency funds completely and provide reduced SNAP benefits for November 2025. This covers about $4.6 billion, or half of the $9 billion needed for full payments. States would cover the rest, if they will. Virginia probably will, but the other ones, a lot of them are on the wait and see, shelter in place, hurricane situation. A lot of these states are we have the money, but we don't want to spend the money. That's what a lot of these states are doing right now. A lot of these states are and there's different levels. Some states are one state is we are ready to pay it out, the full amount. Other states are we're going to pay it out weekly just to see when this thing comes back online. Some states are we're going to pay for pantries and set up mobile pantries. And some states are we're not going to do shit. We're just going to wait. That's what some states are doing. You look at I am not going to pick on Kentucky. I'm not going to pick on the other states too. God, I just love picking on Kentucky. I just love it. All right. Anyway, so the point I'm getting at here, just to be fair, at the end of the day, they're intending to do it. They're going to spend the money unless Trump, who's the big boss, he's president, says, no, we're not doing this. And he's got a ton of options. A lot of you guys don't realize in law, he has a bunch of options to either slow down the legal process of actually paying these things out or appeal to a higher judge. or seek certain things, seek certain limitations, throw a whole wrench in the system, require something from the other party, require the judge to update their understanding as to what's going on based on what they're seeing, seek clarification. Again, they got all kinds of options to slow down the actual payment, and that's important for people to understand, Next quote, USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins, November 4th, 2025. Guidance issued to states on distributing partial benefits, but warned it would be a cumbersome process, potentially delaying payments for weeks. All right, you see what's happening? You see what's happening is they can't get the math together to pay half a benefit check to everybody when they're supposed to receive their check. Now, some of you would be like, hey, wait a minute. You only have between, basically the days you need to set it up. So let's say they get it all set up within the next 4 days. All they got to do is pay out to the people who didn't get a check half what the check would be, and then pay everybody else half the check when their spot comes up. Because remember, they might not have to pay those people if the government comes back online and then the regular funding comes in and then they pay them their full amount for the people that receive the benefits farther down the month. Next quote, Senate Republicans, official account, November 4th, 2025, quote, Senator Wyden has voted against SNAP funding 14 times. If he did his job and voted to reopen the government, SNAP would be fully funded. Here's the gig. Yes, Democrats have voted down reopening the government on the thing that they normally vote on to keep the government funded 14 times in a row. Yes, Democrats are just, honestly, they're slightly more to blame than Republicans with this whole situation. They are slightly more to blame because of the whole hyperfunding, clinics / emergency rooms, which is where the whole illegal immigrant thing comes in and how they use that for medical treatment. Which again, my thing is this. Look, Biden, it was basically treason. He welded open the gates of America so that tens of millions of people could come in. My argument is just, look, ICE has to do its job. It's got to find the people, got to export the people. But while they're here, why would we not fund the emergency rooms and rural clinics to treat these immigrants that are here illegally? Do you realize how quickly somebody can get sick by being bitten by a flea that has some god-awful sickness? Have you ever heard of the bubonic plague? It's like an important part of history. You might want to just Google it a little here and there. It's horrifying. Yeah, we got CRISPR. Maybe we could figure out how the proteins wouldn't allow it to grow and move and whatever. But my point to you with this whole situation, I hope you hear me out with this, is look, there's tens of millions of immigrants that are not supposed to be here. Tens of millions. There are more illegal immigrants here than all of the recipients of Social Security disability insurance benefits plus supplemental security income benefits. And I swear to the highest Lord, I swear to the creator of the house who did it not with hands, that if one more person puts in the comments, I know there's going to be one. I just feel it. I feel it. I can feel it coming. If one more person puts in the comments that immigrants can't get Social Security benefits, I am going to have a conniption. I'm going to have a Shirley Temple explosion. I don't even know what my brain is going to do. I don't even know. Please look up how supplemental security income works. There are 3 categories: people over 65, disabled, and entrants, refugees, asylum seekers, trafficked people, immigrants. I'm fine though. I'm all right. I'm okay. Yeah, I'm all right. All right. So here's the deal. Next quote. Here we go. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, Republican, Oklahoma. A federal court approved USDA contingency funds to allow partial SNAP benefits to get out the door as quickly as possible. To fully fund SNAP, end the Schumer shutdown. Food stamps should be preserved for only those who need it most, as the program was intended. Look, you want my honest opinion where food is going? This country is the greatest country on earth. How is food not a right for its citizens? I mean, think about that. The greatest country on earth. There's Washington, flowing outward hair in a weird hat. There he is standing upon the boat as he begins his attack on Christmas Eve and begins his amazing military conquest with his when he's standing up on that little boat going, yes, look at my tights. Here's the thing. We became the greatest country on earth, and instead of investing into our citizens by healthcare for all that actually works, not like that socialist BS that's in Europe, okay? Not like that Canadian shit show that they have, but like real, Medicare for all, okay? How did we not make food a right for all American citizens? I mean, think about that. Is that not weird? Like, look, I agree. Certain cheeses that smell a certain way should cost money. I agree. All right. I mean, when there's certain foods out there, I want to see you doing some real cork sniffing shit where you're like, yeah, this is worth money. I will pay money for this. But I honestly have a problem. I think it's ridiculous. I think Americans, food should be a right. I mean, how much money did we give to Ukraine? How much money did we give to Israel? I mean, it's a drop in the bucket compared to this. I don't get it. Like, at some point we have to say, look, let me show you the biggest failure in Social Security when it comes to the government showing that it does not care for its people properly. Let me give you the most clear-cut sign that there ever will be. The moment they said, you know what, people are living longer, we need to raise the retirement age to 67. Now they're saying raise it to 69. The moment they try to raise it on you, that means that they didn't invest money properly for people that they knew would live longer. Every decade in the 1800s, people lived a year longer. 1900, 1910, 1920, 1930, 1940, people are living 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years longer per decade. They knew. It wasn't a surprise. There was no shock out of nowhere. Like, they had it. They got it. They were aware of it. It's not like the census was not fully aware of what was going on. I sit back and I think to myself, like, how the hell did we get to this place? Oh, and here's the best part. Your retirement benefits that they make you get older to get access to, they didn't move the SSI old age date. SSI old age is still 65, but the program your butt has to pay for got moved to 67 and is about to be moved to 69. So just let that sink in. Let that just marinate inside your existence for a little bit. All right, next quote. Senator John Barrasso, Republican, Wyoming. Then we're going to do the Democrat quotes. November 3rd, 2025. On a Democratic resolution to fully fund SNAP, it's a political stunt by the Democrats. The resolution they're offering is empty. Democrats knew their actions threatened food assistance. They were fully aware of it. Man has a point. Democrats are willing to let the poverty class starve. Republicans are willing to do that. We already knew they'd be willing to do that. We knew that because that's not his voting population for the most part. Democrats, they need impoverished people. They need LGBTQ+. They need people of Islam. They don't have the Latino, Black, Jewish votes as much as they used to. And let me tell you something. When you lose the Jewish vote, that is bad. Your party just took a hit. I mean, the amount of money that would be donated from the Jewish population, your party would take a hit. Chevy, thank you for the $5 donation. Let me put a big heart there. That's awesome. Just to help you out with the toys you need. I super appreciate it because the music gear that we're setting up, we're gonna actually have halftime shows. It's crazy. It's cool. I'm super excited about it. It's amazing. It's just amazing. All right, now let's look at what the Democrats are saying and give them their fair moment in the sun to consider what's going on. Here we go. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer steps to the bat. November 4th, 2025, quote, Donald Trump is being taken back to court over his refusal to fully fund SNAP. He's creating a hunger crisis in America, all so that he can avoid reopening the government and fixing healthcare for millions of Americans. It's horrific. Look, Chuck Schumer is going to win with the impoverished class to make Trump the evil thing. Because for a lot of the impoverished class, Trump is already the evil thing. And keep in mind, CNN, ABC, MSNBC News, like all those, they're going to find people who voted for Trump and then have them give like a statement about how they're not voting for Trump anymore. They're just going to flash that shit over and over again on their news station non-stop. That's the trick. Look at this person who converted. Look at this person who converted. Look at that one too. That one converted real quick. It's all just legacy news BS. It's just constant. They do it on the Republican side too. You just get people who have like super blue hair, you got full, rainbow hair going on. And then 3 years later, they're sitting there with a Republican going, yeah, realize that's not how I achieve a financial security in my life. That's not the way of life where I'm going to have money to be able to raise my kids and yada, yada. It's the same thing played on both sides. They just promote those who are switching sides. All right. Now, I want to say something about what Chuck Schumer is saying here. Chuck Schumer is asking for more than what normally they would actually, sign off on. So like at the end of the day, they kept voting for the same thing over and over. Schumer's not asking for the same thing over and over. He's the guy who's asking for billions upon billions upon billions more. So like at the end of the day, you got to keep in mind, just to be fair with this whole situation, that Schumer is the one asking for more and demanding more. And also, yes, Trump is letting the poor starve, but so is Schumer. There's no angels in this, government shutdown bonanza. There's just really not. There's really not. Senator Patty Murray, Democrat, November 4th, in response to Trump's post, he said, or Senator Patty, this is doing everything possible, ? Criticizing the administration's partial funding plan as insufficient. And, the senator's right. Senator's right, right? At the end of the day, the senator is basically sitting back and saying, hey, all you can do is use the contingency funds. You can't find slush funds. I mean, every time Ukraine comes to the table, although Trump has cut Ukraine off largely, but when Biden was in and Ukraine came to the table, man, they were opening the bank vault, shoveling billions in his direction, whether it was in military machinery or pensions for the people of Ukraine, whatever. So, I mean, Senator Murray has a point here. They definitely has a point. They could find the funds relatively quickly. Senator Ben Ray Lujan, Democrat, Congress funded food assistance. The courts confirmed the authority to release it. President Trump still refuses, leaving seniors, children, veterans, and families at risk. Hunger is the result of President Trump's choices. Republicans chose this. He's got Trump there. Ultimately, the reason the government hasn't reopened is because Schumer's asking for more. But the things he's asking for are not that bad. They're constantly selling them as these horror. They're mostly subsidies to help people pay for their health insurance. Yeah, there's a bunch of that, like, immigrant stuff for like rural areas, blah, 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 clinics, emergency rooms. Yeah, there's a bunch of that. But a lot of it is subsidies to help Americans pay for their health insurance because they can't afford their health insurance otherwise. I don't know. I feel like Trump, it just needs to realize that he could become a president of the people by also supporting the impoverished, but finding better ways to get them to earn money and have a better future. Because starving Americans that are poor is just not a great commercial. You're going to see Sarah McLachlan up there, with the dog and cat sad video trying to tell people about how you should donate money to the starving dog and the starving cat. Or was it Sarah McLachlan? It was somebody. I think it was a Sarah, right? At the end of the day, that commercial made you cry because you were like, why are we not funding cats and dogs? This is silly. We can fund them. Next one. Representative Rosa DeLauro, Democrat. MAHA actually stands for Make America Hungry Again, apparently. I mean, it's cute. It's cute. It's sad, but it is cute. It is cute. Because remember, at the end of the day, Trump is basically saying to people, it's okay for you to be hungry because we have a point to make. And Schumer is doing the same thing. Schumer is choosing literally, healthcare for people who can't afford it, and immigrants and illegal immigrants over essentially, just to be fair with this thing, the people that are Americans that need their food stamps. That's what he's doing. That is what he's doing. Next one, Rep. Rashida Tlaib. It shouldn't take a court order to get the president to stop starving families and release the funds. Doesn't make a bad point, but the reason he is at that stuck point is he's trying to force the poor to go ahead and basically tell Schumer to reopen the government, which again, I don't think Trump realizes that's just not going to work. They are not soldiers. They do not have battle plans. They do not know how to put their boots on and march in the same direction consistently. That is not the impoverished class. That is not their thing. Rep. LaMonica McIver, let's take a look. Democrat, New Jersey. This is illegal. Trump wants to break the law to keep SNAP from people who need it. So hold hungry families hostage and worsen food insecurity in America. This has nothing to do with the shutdown and everything to do with his administration's corruption and cruelty. Yeah, no, that's wrong. That's completely wrong. This entire thing is because of a shutdown between Trump and Schumer. And then, of course, Hakeem, right? So he's looking at this thing going, how can I be important in this? But at the end of the day, just to be fair with this whole situation, this is two whales waiting for the other one to gas up and poof all over the place. We've got two guys basically getting hot on the beach, these two whales. And at some point, the gas inside them is just going to make them all over the place. You have essentially Trump, modern rah, 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 and Schumer, old school. I mean, he is the swamp. He is basically the swamp of the old way of government, the old way of the United States, which doesn't work. I mean, it's literally like a poison pill. It's a terrible. It's just not. We can't succeed with his model. We can't succeed with this model. Like if I were to sum up Schumer, we can't succeed with his model. We need new Democrats. We need although the new Democrats, man, they are really woke. And they that party is swung full left. I'm actually excited to see what happens to New York. I'm excited. You know what I mean? They're going to pick their first communist socialist. I'm excited. I want to see what happens. I know history, so I know it's going to be a shit show, but I'm excited. You know what I mean? Look, sometimes you have to let areas experience horrific things so that everybody else knows not to do that. You know what I mean? Like if you know anything about communism, Russia and communism, right? The version of communism they had in Germany was particularly bad for my people. The version of communism and monopolyism and, that sort of existence that they had in the Pharaoh's times, that was not particularly good. Imperialistic overlords, not good. But it's all kind of out of the same thing. Communism, monopolies, it's all the same stuff. Just somebody with too much power. That's what it is, right? Next one. Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat, Oregon, November 3rd. Trump is using food as a weapon against children, families, and seniors to enact his Make America Hungry agenda. Kids and families are not poker chips or hostages. Trump must release the entirety of SNAP funds immediately. Now, what you've probably realized at this point is that you have two parties that have not come up with any real strategic plan here. There are 1,000 ways the government could raise the funds and pay for food stamps. There's 1,000 ways to do it. Trump is not coming forward with them. Nor have the Democrats created a plan based off of the accounting department options that exist for funding them, because they're more worried about funding the additions they want on reopening the government. You got two non-angels in this. Let's read through this real quick. This was by Zach Schoenfeld. Trump admin says it will provide partial November stamp benefits. Now remember, his administration says they're going to do it, but Trump is saying basically he's not going to do it. So we don't know. They were saying yesterday that they should be ready to pay him out by Wednesday. But now, remember, they get one call from him and they can't do it. He has the ability to halt the process, even if some district court judge said you have to do it. And technically, it was two of them. The Trump administration will provide partial food stamp benefits this month as the government shutdown approaches a record length, officials told the federal judge Monday. The administration indicated it will not tap other funds to fill the gap, meaning the more than 40 million people enrolled in supplemental nutrition assistance programs are set to receive reduced benefits, which, again, is just part of the strategy of Trump to get the impoverished to go be angry towards Schumer. It's not going to work that way. They're just going to hate Trump. They're not going to hate Schumer. They're going to see Schumer as this bright, shining, amazing, riding a white horse into the sunset on a Hollywood Boulevard thing, whereas Trump is this evil, horrible thing that's withholding all these food stamps. The impoverished are not going to see Trump on the terms that he wants himself to be seen. On Friday, 2 federal judges ruled that Trump administration must empty a multi-billion-dollar emergency fund before cutting off SNAP. The administration says the fund is about $4.65 billion. They're saying now it's a little bit less. It is not enough to cover the full November, blah, blah, blah. They're going to try and pay out half. So bottom line, okay. U.S. Department of Agriculture could use dollars from another funding source to fill the remaining gap for November. The new update indicates that the Trump administration will not do so, calling it an unacceptable risk. Section 32 Child Nutrition Program funds are not a contingency fund for SNAP. Patrick Penn, who oversees the SNAP program at the USDA, wrote in a sworn declaration Monday, using billions of dollars from child nutrition for SNAP would leave an unprecedented gap in child nutrition funding that Congress has never had to fill with annual appropriations, and USDA cannot predict what Congress will do under these circumstances, he continued. He's talking about things like WIC. Basically, will they be able to pay out WIC? And at the end of the day, I think the billionaires are going to go in and fund WIC benefits continuously through November and December if they can't pull this government together. I think that's realistically what's going to happen. Okay. Next thing, quote, for at least some states, USDA's understanding is that the system changes states must implement to provide the reduced benefit amounts will take anywhere from a few weeks to up to several months. The SNAP lapse has become one of the most visible signs of the government shutdown as it approaches its 6th week. Democrat-led states, cities, and private groups sued the administration last week as it warned that SNAP benefits would expire in November as shutdown negotiations remained in a stalemate. Okay. Quote, it shouldn't take a court order to force the president to provide essential nutrition, yada, 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 so on and so forth. Now you know the quotes. Now, I have a special treat for you. I am going to actually give you the summaries of the most famous Supreme Court rulings on food stamps so that you can understand, not like a lawyer, but closer to a lawyer, what essentially the Supreme Court would do with this situation. Why? Why would we look at the Supreme Court? That is because we have 2 separate rulings from 2 separate district court judges, which means that when you have 2 separate district court judges that could potentially be appealed and go up to the circuit court, you might have a slight disagreement between the circuit courts as to what should be done. And if that occurs, or if the president requests it, the Supreme Court could step in to rule on what should happen with food stamp benefits and how they should be released going forward. You might say, you know what? They're going to be paid. They're going to reopen. It's going to happen. I disagree. I think food stamps are the thing that keeps the government not reopening. Trump believes, I think incorrectly, but Trump believes that if he puts more pressure and more pressure and more pressure on the poor, they're going to start to put hatred and anger on Schumer. The president doesn't get that the poor are used to being poor. If you ask the middle class, hey, middle class, where do you go to get food from a food pantry or a homeless help facility where you can get a shower? The middle class is going to be like, I don't know. I live in my suburban house over there, right? On my little, quarter acre, yada, yada. That's my spot. That's where I live. That's where I do my thing. The poor are going to go, oh, you go between this street and this street. You go to the second door on the right, and that's where you sign in. The poor are designed through their experience to know how to get food. Trump is thinking that they're just going to sit there and be angry towards Schumer. They're not. They're going to go get their food and sit there and be pissed off at him. I'm just saying, it is what it is. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, like you got to understand that's how the homeless work. They know how to get food. They do it all the time. They get their food stamps. A lot of them, unfortunately, sell them for other stuff that they need. Some of it legal, some of it not. And then they go to the food stamp, and then they go to these, pantries, these other places. They get the food to replace what the food stamps were supposed to buy, and boom, they do their monthly yada yada. That's what it is. That's how it works. All right, we're going to go through some Supreme Court choices and decisions here because I need you to understand how the Supreme Court actually works when it comes to food stamps. Case number 1, United States Department of Agriculture v. Murray. Again, case number 1, United States Department of Agriculture v. Murray, 1973. Supreme Court struck down Section 5B of the Food Stamp Act, which disqualified households from benefits if any members over 18 were claimed as a tax dependent by a non-household member, as it violated the Fifth Amendment's due process clause by creating an irrebuttable presumption of non-need without allowing individualized hearings to rebut it. Okay, let me summarize that because a lot of you are not going to know what that actually means. So there was a situation where they tried to change the rule in around 1973, where they're basically saying, hey, look, if somebody is claiming you as a dependent, right, and you're somehow attached to that person, well, that person, is probably helping you out, so you probably don't need food stamps. Now, remember, there's a weakness to this argument, which is that if somebody claimed you as a dependent a year ago, right, as far to filing their taxes, that doesn't mean that your current situation doesn't need food stamps. You might need food stamps. So the case involved low-income households denied aid due to unrelated tax claims from prior years, despite their current poverty, and the court reasoned that such a rigid rule irrationally excluded truly needy families, prioritizing administrative convenience over fairness. This decision reinforced the need for case-by-case evaluations and welfare programs to avoid unconstitutional presumptions, ensuring eligibility focuses on present circumstances rather than outdated or irrelevant factors, such as the past tax submission, where somebody submitted their tax documents and claimed the kid who was trying to get benefits as a dependent. Now, what should you learn from this case? There is a balance between the Supreme Court law when they rule on should food stamps, have easy administration. Like, it's easy for them with bright line rules to pay out the money that they're going to do. And it's easy for them to create bright line rules that will restrict people from getting the benefits. How much restriction, how much bright line do we give to the administration of food stamps versus how the hell do we know if the kid's actually poor? How do we know that this person's really poor? It needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, and it can't be too bright line where we are mass denying impoverished people. That's what you should draw from that claim. Next claim. United States Department of Agriculture v. Moreno, 1973, same year. Supreme Court invalidated a 1971 amendment to the Food Stamp Act that excluded households with unrelated individuals from eligibility, ruling it violated the equal protection component of the Fifth Amendment's due process clause for lacking a rational basis tied to the program's goals of alleviating hunger and supporting agriculture. All right, again, I asked AI to create this list from a group of cases I wanted, and I don't think it made it simple enough for a lot of you to understand what that mumbo jumbo is. So let me explain what that mumbo jumbo actually is, okay? The Supreme Court had a case in front of it where basically they were redefining what a family would be. And if there were people living in that house that were not genetically, by blood, familial, actually related, then that could potentially cause a household to have members that were denied food stamps. Now, the Supreme Court usually rules that a family can be anything. And I'm going to be real straight with you on this. The more impoverished a family is, the more often you have a bunch of people choosing to act like a family, living in a dwelling, even though they're not all blood related. Okay? The more wealth you see, the more likely the family is literally all genetically, all by bloodline, all DNA helix related. The spiral helix is shared between the lot of them. You get a rich, rich, rich family, very likely that rich, rich family in their mega mansion only has the people that they are actually related to. Okay. All right. The provision aimed at barring hippie communes, discriminating against low-income groups sharing housing for economic reasons without advancing legitimate interests like fraud prevention, as existing rules already addressed abuses. This landmark decision emphasized that classifications harming unpopular groups without justification are unconstitutional, broadening access to nutritional aid by basing eligibility on need rather than the household composition. Let me explain what that means. In the 70s and the 60s, there were these things called hippies. They were people who would rather have fun than work at a traditional job. We have those today. They're called woke people, right? That's what that really, it's similar. Now, as a result, the governments that were in place, they didn't want to pay a bunch of food stamps to hippies because they wanted the hippies to go get a job. Sound familiar to Trump? Should sound familiar to Trump. He wants the hippies to go get a job, right? Sounds familiar, right? Okay. So as a result of that, they said, hey, if you have a household, a hippie commune filled with a bunch of individuals that basically are not blood related, then at the end of the day, you can't receive food stamps from this program. The Supreme Court said, no, you gotta pay the hippies too. You gotta pay the hippies. That's what you can learn from that Supreme Court decision. You gotta pay the hippies their food stamps. All right, next one. Burns v. Alcala, 1975. So 2 years later than the other two. All right, was it 2 years? No, it was 2 years. 2 years later. The Supreme Court held that the term dependent child in the Social Security Act's Aid to Families with Dependent Children, AFDC program, does not include unborn children. Thus, states are not required to provide benefits to pregnant women on behalf of their fetuses. Interpreting the statute's ordinary meaning in legislative history, the court found no intent to extend eligibility prenatally, as separate provisions addressed maternal health, rejecting arguments for ambiguity or administrative interpretations favoring inclusion. All right, I'm going to stop reading its summary. You guys aren't going to understand what that is. Burns v. Alcala, 1975, right? Women were saying, hey, we have a child in the womb. We are pregnant. You have to pay us child in the womb benefits in the form of food stamps. And some of you were like, well, that doesn't make sense. And then some of you were like, well, yeah, she's going to eat more because she's eating for two. Right? So maybe you're on one side, maybe whatever. It's whatever. You know what I mean? The court ultimately said, no, we're not going to pay for the children that are not yet born. Now, me being a hippie, I don't know. I feel like women that are pregnant should be able to get like more food stamps that are almost in the double arena. Now they do get, the system set up to provide based off of, ramp up systems. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think pregnant women should get double food stamps? I mean, they're eating for two. The secondary is obviously not a full size human, but they are eating for two, right? I don't know. Yeah, Amy James said, amen, pregnant women need proper nutrition. Yeah, I don't know if you guys realize this, but at the end of the day, if we don't have a nurturing environment for the future generations of humans that are being brought up as citizens of America, then we're going to end up with an army of shit show. That's where we're going. You know what I mean? Like, if we don't create the system, and even if the parents culturally don't know how to teach their kids how to invest, if we don't create the education system to get these kids to learn how to invest, and I don't mean in their future rap song signal with their rap song CD and their rap song hit. I don't mean that. I mean like in their future, like how to invest money, how to make money. You know, when I think about all of my education, they did not teach me about money. They did a little bit in my MBA, but in my law school degree, in my law school classes, they never taught me how to create a fee agreement, a fee petition, and hours spent timesheet. None of that. They never taught me any of that. So, you know, at the end of the day, we got to go ahead and pay for these kids to actually be in a better spot to be able to do these things, to have a better future America. Next one. Nebel v. Hine, 1977. The Supreme Court upheld federal and state regulations under the Food Stamp Act that included transportation allowances for job training and household income without specific deductions, finding them consistent with the act and not violating of the equal protection or due process clauses. The rules treated such allowances like other income, using a standardized 10% deduction and a 30% income cap to account for expenses, a reasonable administrative choice to avoid complexity and ensure equity. This unanimous decision affirmed the Secretary of Agriculture's broad authority to define income flexibility, balancing efficiency program administration with the goal of providing nutritional support to low-income households. All right, let me explain what this actually means. In this case, at the end of the day, what they were looking at is they were looking at if somebody receives some other type of benefit, should they reduce their food stamps because something else is giving them a little bit of money? And what the court said was, we don't have the time to figure out deductions for each and every food stamp recipient. That is why we have the 10% standardized deduction and the 30% standardized income cap. So what they were saying was, it's going to be too hard to administer these benefits if we have to figure out deductions for everybody based on other benefits that they receive. So we're just using a bright line rule of 10% deduction, 30% income cap. That was the model that they said. And you can see, because they said, look, we got to pay food stamps, but we are not willing to spend more administrative money to figure out who, what, when, and where people get, and then calculate it off of each individual person. Everybody has the same standardized deductions and the same income cap with that. Of course, it's more complex than that now, but you get the point. Final case right here. Atkins v. Parker, 1985. The Supreme Court ruled that mass mailed notices informing food stamp recipients of a congressional reduction in the earned income deduction from 20% to 18% satisfies due process under the 14th Amendment and complied with the Food Stamp Act, as individualized calculations were not required. Were not required for legislative changes affecting benefits across the board. The notices, which explain the change in rights to hearings with benefit freezes pending resolution, provided adequate process. It's about notice, adequate notice, given the legislative nature of the adjustment, distinguishing it from individual adverse actions. This decision supported the efficient implementation of program modification while protecting recipients through existing safeguards, emphasizing that the legislative process itself affords sufficient due process for broad entitlement alterations. My apologies. Here's what that whole claim is about. That claim was about the Supreme Court saying, hey, if they give you notice in this fashion and they tell everybody in this way, it's enough notice that you should be aware that they're changing the rules and regulations that apply to you. And so it didn't require all this extra legislative hoopla to notify you as to the things and adjustments that were going on with these changes. Now, why did they do this? The Supreme Court was saying, hey, we don't want to have to spend a lot of extra time and money telling you about food stamp changes, which is directly related to what's about to happen with Trump. Because with Trump, he's saying, man, it could take weeks for us to figure out all the math to pay this stuff out. Now, remember, don't forget, the Republicans were also the party that when the Democrats said, you know, it could take us a year to figure out how to pay out all of the Social Security, Fairness Act funds to all the double, recipients of pensions, right? They're like, the Democrats are like, man, it's going to take us a year to figure out who gets how much for all these Social Security Fairness Act changes. right? Then the Republicans came in, and within a month and a half to 2 months, man, those benefits are rolling out. But now you see the Republicans have flipped that. Now the Republicans are like, whoa, we got to pay food stamps? Man, this could take a long time. This could take a very long time. It's just politics. That's what's going on. That's what's so ridiculous about this situation. It's literally they're using the basic food of people to decide who's going to bend a knee between what's, Schumer, the swamp monster, and Trump, the ultimate king. It's what swamp monster Godzilla versus King Kong. That's what you got here. That's basically the whole spiel. All right. With that said, please remember to like and subscribe. If you enjoy these videos where we talk about things and go into more of a legal understanding, please remember too, I don't do Medicare sign up or Medicare benefit stuff. If you have questions, if you want to get a tune-up on your Medicare setup, please give them a call, 339-226-6287. Real simple, real easy. Just give them a call and walk through your medications, upcoming medical treatments, surgeries, all that stuff, so that they can go ahead and pick a really great program for you. With that said, also, the next video we're about to do is talking about something that is very, very secretive. It is about the Council of Six, who are in charge of Black Op CDI unit investigations, where they basically go and have meetings about high-level targets and the systems used to actually hunt down disabled and see if they truly are disabled people. Attorney Walter Hnot, please remember to like and subscribe. If you enjoy these videos, head over to Google, type in Disability Resolution Law Firm or Disability Resolution Florida. Throw some stars up there. I always love that. Throw some stars up. Also, we go live on Mondays and Thursdays. I fell asleep yesterday. We will go live tonight where I'll answer questions for free. And if you want a bigger session with me, a 30-minute or 60-minute private session, mini contract is below. I'll catch you later. We'll catch up with the next video. Give me 10 minutes and we'll rock and roll from there. Attorney Walter Hnot, thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.